we just had a pretty historic update. A very, very historic update. After a nearly 40-year-long insurgency, and after 25 years in prison, and 40,000 deaths, mostly on the Kurdish side, but 40,000 deaths due to the insurgency, the leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Party and the icon on all their memorabilia, if you know anybody that's anywhere connected to any subsidiary, you see his face on everything, on all their flags, on all their books, on all, they love Ocalan, they love Abo. He has come out from within Turkish imprisonment and announced that he believes that the Kurdistan Workers' Party, otherwise known as the PKK, the Kurdish communist guerrilla movement against Turkey, should lay down its arms and disband. This is a gigantic moment. Now, this didn't come completely out of nowhere, though. It actually was not that long ago when an ally of Erdogan, his name is, I believe, like Baseli or like Delvit Baseli. I'm sorry, I'm not Turkish. I'm not great at pronouncing the names, but he's an ultra-nationalist ally of Erdogan, and he announced that it would be a good idea if maybe they left, or maybe they would consider letting Ocalan out of prison if Ocalan came out and announced that, you know, peace was coming to the land, the war against Turkey is over, and asked for the PKK to lay down its arms. And then Ocalan, who is a gigantic figure in the Kurdish community, not all Kurds like Ocalan, but a lot of Kurds do, particularly those in Turkey who are active in like the Kurdish struggle for more representation in the country. Him being released would be big. It could be big for the Turkish relationship with the Kurdish community. Him telling the PKK to put down its arms could be big, because then it could lead to, you know, Turkish soldiers no longer having to fight against this insurgency. It could maybe lead to a lessening of tensions in Syria.
Dylan, are you still Ukraine? Sorry, I haven't had much time to keep up with you recently.
No, I am not in Ukraine. I'm in the United States, but I plan to go back to Ukraine next month if I can get my affairs in order fast enough. But that is dependent upon, me getting my gear and paperwork in order in time. Thank you for the $10. Anyway, Abdullah Öcalan comes out, makes this statement, but it was only after this other ultra-nationalist ally of Erdogan came out and said it would maybe be a good idea if he came out, made the statement, called for the PKK to disarm, and then under those conditions, Abo could be let out. He could be let out, he could go back to his home at 75 years of age after 25 years in a Turkish prison cell, in a maximum security prison, because he's definitely Turkish enemy number one, right? So he says that, and this is a big surprise, because Erdogan's ultra-nationalist ally is saying to let out what the Turkish government sees as basically the terrorist-in-chief of the Kurdish terrorist movement, PKK. That's how they view it, because of the PKK's different attacks over the years, including bombings and shootings and all sorts of stuff, assassinations and mostly attacks on Turkish soldiers, but those attacks have not been solely restricted to Turkish military personnel. There have been instances where civilians have died. And so for them to come out and say that, for the ultra-nationalist wing to say it was a big thing. And then it was followed with this. Ocalan coming out and calling for the group to put down its arms. Now, the first thing is, will the PKK put down its arms? Well, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say exactly how much influence Abdullah Öcalan has over the Kurdistan Workers' Party after 25 years in prison. But let me tell you, from all the people that I know that's within that movement, like that dude is on every flag. They give him like a cute nickname. It's like Abo or something. They love that dude. He's got basically like a cult of personality within not only the Kurdistan Workers' Party, but that goes into, it's like Apo. Yeah, that goes into Syria. A lot of the people fighting in Syria as part of the SDF, the majority of them, or actually I don't know if it's a majority anymore, but I think it might actually have been changed up to a majority were Arabs, but I don't know if that's the case now. But a very large portion of the fighting force are Kurds, tied to the YPG and the YPJ, which have deep ties to the Kurdistan Workers' Party. And if you check out these YPJ fighters and the type of memorabilia they're holding around his books, which he has a lot of books on, like this type of socialist collectivism, democratic centralism. I forget exactly, but it's democratic confederalism, I believe, is how they pitch it. They got those books. They got his face on the wall. They got his face on flags, on these yellow flags they fly everywhere. He's like a little cult leader. And I'm saying that just to be blunt about it. They treat him like a cult icon. They have his face on places the way the Russians have Putin's face on weird places. In fact, I would say his face might even be more around everywhere. It's not as much as it used to be. Definitely in Syria, they've died it down a lot. But I think that icon, like him, carries significant weight, and that him calling for this is going to cause the organization to reflect on disarming and dissolving. But I don't think that they're going to disarm and dissolve and roll over. I think that the only way that the Kurdistan Workers' Party is truly going to dissolve is if, for example, there are concessions that make them think that Kurds can live as integrated members of Turkish society. What does that mean? It means that the Kurdish politicians that have been jailed outside of Ocalan have to be released. They have to be released. All of the democratically elected mayors from southeastern Turkey and the eastern parts of Turkey and the Kurdish communities, they have to be released. They have to be released as well. The Kurds have to be allowed to elect their own leaders, and the Kurds have to be allowed to rule themselves to some degree. Now, when I say rule themselves to some degree, I'm not saying it has to be like the Kurdistan regional government in Iraq. I'm not saying that. But the federal government cannot just bust in the door and start arresting government officials every time they implement local policies on language or local curriculum or whatever, if they want to. They have to allow them to rule themselves to some extent. I mean, the Kurdish people are the largest people without a state, ethnicity without a state. That is significant. And they have their own culture and history. And so I think that giving it the respect that it deserves should not be a big ask if the benefit for that is the ending of over 40 years of war. I mean, think about how the position of the Kurdistan Worker Party has changed. Originally in the 80s, they wanted an independent Kurdish state. Then in the last decade, it's moderated to like more autonomy. Then to find a settlement, you'll probably be able to get them to compromise further to maybe not even like a Kurdistan regional government type situation, but just some amount of like regional autonomy. Maybe not even like a local regional parliament, but some amount of like, okay, over here you have like a situation where they can have these laws for local language and culture language lessons, and they can, it might just be that for all we know. But for the opportunity that this offers Turkey to make peace within its borders, to make peace outside of its borders, in Syria as well. And let me tell you something. The Syrian SDF officials have reacted very positively to this. They love this idea because if the Turks find peace with the PKK, what justification could Turkey find for invading Syria and bombing Kurdish villages or the city of Rojava? What justification could they invent? It'd be a lot harder. You would be undercutting the justification for their invasion and the continued bombing campaign that is allowing fighting to continue in northeastern Syria unabated, despite any peace deal, ceasefire, whatever people talk about. The bombing still continues. For that to stop, not only would that be a huge humanitarian gain for the people of northeastern Syria, but it would allow them to really begin the process of rebuilding and reintegration with the Syrian state. And it would make the process of reintegration into the Syrian state a much less awkward for the government in Damascus, considering how their relationship with Turkey. So, to me, if this happens, this is good. This is very good. But it's going to be dependent upon the Turks making some amount of compromises when it comes to the Kurds. And it's going to be dependent upon Abdullah Öcalan's influence and the people being tired of war enough to put down their arms and go home and live amongst themselves. and for the Turkish government to stop their repressive attitudes towards not only Kurdish politicians, but Kurdish protesters and Kurdish journalists. So that like crushing of the civil society and the press, the Kurds, I doubt they're going to want that. I doubt they're going to want a Turkish dominated government to suppress their press. So they're going to have to allow them to have their own civil society. If they can do that and make those sacrifices from that centralization of control, the gains are so bountiful. In Syria, in peace in Syria, peace in Turkey, rebuilding in Turkey, social cohesion. Let's just see if, but I mean, I want it. I want it bad. We'll have to wait and see if number one, Ocalan is released. And so that they make good on that promise and that the PKK really does disarm and concessions are made. We'll have to wait for the steps to come, because if you send the signal that you're willing to let go of Ocalan, that tells me that you're willing to probably make some concessions. But if they're not, then this is all for naught, because the PKK is not going to put down its guns for nothing. I also want to throw out there that another thing that makes this more likely to succeed in my mind is that Erdogan's constitutional term ends in 3 years. And he wants a constitutional change so he can rule past 2028 after winning the last Turkish election. But he wants to, but in order to do that, he's going to need more support. And in order to get that support, considering his legislative issues and a poor performance in the last elections, he might need the Kurdish community. And so I think part of this is not only so he can put the feather in his cap of making peace with the PKK, but also so he can try to win over more Kurdish votes. So this is not just purely like, oh, this is completely based upon how can we find peace between our peoples. That's a pure interest. There are also some clear self-interested political interests as well, which in this case might actually contribute to peace. God help us. Hopefully it does. Free Kurdistan, to be quite honest. I mean, look, an independent Kurdish state would be great. I don't think that's happening in Turkey anytime soon. And I don't think that the PKK's violent struggle is anywhere closer to getting us that state. I think they could maybe get compromises from the government, get them to stop harassing the Kurds in Syria, but I just don't think they're going to get I just don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think we're much closer to a Turkish invasion of northeastern Syria if a settlement's not found with the Damascus government. And that scares me enough that I can understand Ocalan's motivations. He needs the DEM. So for those of you who don't know, the DEM, that is the majority of the world's Kurds are in Turkey. There's Kurds in Iran, there's Kurds in Syria, you know, there's Kurds, of course, in other places that have migrated. But the majority of the world's Kurds are in Turkey. 15 to 20% of the Turkey's populations are Kurds. A very large percentage. And their party is, the Kurdish party is the DEM, and that's the party they've been suppressing. And so I think that I think that there's maybe an approach of, if we can legalize our Kurdish activism in the state and have a civil society that's functioning, then we're much more likely to achieve goals by compromising here, and then working in the system to try to get our goals achieved, then continued violent struggle in the mountains. Also, it could stop an invasion of northeastern Syria, which I think that is probably a big immediate motivation. I still believe that the Kurds very well do deserve a country, but I also, we have to also be practical about the immediate. The Kurds will be thankful and be allies in the parliament. Yeah, I mean, I think I have some words actually from this. One second, let me read you some reactions. And actually, I think it'd be interesting to read his statement from Ocalan. I am making a call for the laying down of arms. and I take on the historical responsibility of this call, Ocalan said in a letter made public by Turkey's pro-Kurdish Dem party members. In his message on Thursday, Ocalan said that the armed struggle had run its course, though he also urged Turkey to show respect for ethnic minorities, freedom of expression, and the rights to democratic self-organization. Ocalan wants his party to hold Congress and to formally agree to dissolve itself, they quoted him as saying. A Dem party delegation visited Ocalan on Thursday in person on his on the Amrali Island. That's his like prison island compound just for him, and later delivered his message in nearby Istanbul. A photo of them together with Ocalan projected onto the wall behind them. There was no immediate response from the PKK headquarters. By the way, that's the most modern photo we've had in Ocalan in years. There was no immediate response from the PKK headquarters in the mountains of northern Iraq, while Kurdish-led forces in Syria said Ocalan's message was positive. In the first reaction to Ocalan's appeal from Erdogan's ruling AK party, its deputy chairman, Ekfan Allah, said Turkey would be free of its shackles if the PKK truly laid down its arms. Well, you know, I think he made the right call, honestly, Ocalan. If it prevents the reignition of another wave in the Syrian civil war and gives them a path forward in Turkey, then I understand it. And plus, like, there's nothing ever saying that the Kurds, if it was all a backstabbing, they couldn't just go back into the mountains. Sounds like surrender to me. I get it. Well, I mean, like, what's your plan then, sir? I mean, look, I'm not trying to be like mean or whatever, but I don't see a plan for the Kurds to get any immediate pathway for them to get a state in Turkey. And I don't see the sentiment changing on that anytime soon. And they've been fighting since the 80s. It's been 40 years. I think what's being achieved is laudable considering the circumstances and what the alternatives are. Turkey cannot defeat the PKK. Kurds cannot create a separate state. Yeah, that's basically it, Subson. Yeah, you're on the money there.